Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for our regular web chat with me, Police and Crime Commissioner Sue Mount-Stevens, and Andy Marsh, Chief Constable of Avon and Somerset. Now, we've been having these weekly chats where we've been talking about COVID-19 and the impact of the regulations and the guidance and how it affects our local people and communities. But today I want to focus on a different topic that's been in the local, national and the international news about the Black Lives Matter protests that was in place on Sunday. And over the last few days, both Avon and Somerset Police and my office, we have received countless social media messages and emails from many people regarding the protests. So I want to ask you, Chief Constable, a number of questions. So, over the last 12 weeks, we have been advising people to stay at home, to keep themselves safe, to socially distance, and to protect the NHS and to save lives. And a lot of local people, you and I included, we've had to change the way that we have lived, that we have engaged with people. And I think a number of people have been very frustrated to see 10,000 people on our streets to protest, and asking why the police allowed those demonstrations to go ahead. So my question to you is, could the police have put a stop to that protest?
So I understand why people are angry and concerned about that. So people have made many sacrifices over the last 12 weeks. They've cancelled weddings, some haven't been able to go to funerals, they haven't seen family and friends, and they've made great sacrifices to get us through the public health crisis. And you and I have urged them to support that, and we've thanked them at these discussions in the past. People have also expressed anger the weekend before, which was very hot, when there were thousands of people on the beaches recreating. And actually we couldn't, nor had the capability to intervene in those issues either. So as regards to the protest, before it happened, indeed as soon as we received notice of likely protest, and we're doing this now because there are more protests planned, we start to engage with protest organisers to try and ensure that people comply with social distancing. We worked actively with leaders across Bristol, across the whole force, to urge them to send out messages for people not to attend. Indeed, in Bristol, the Mayor Marvin Rees and the Deputy Mayor Asher Craig both supported us by saying that this was not the time to attend a protest. But we knew, because we're realists and we've got hundreds of years of experience between us, that people were going to turn out and protest. We'd gauged the feelings and we knew that they were angry. So once we knew that was going to happen, we needed to try and police it in a way that kept people safe and kept property safe. And we certainly could not have prevented the protest taking place. The scenes that people might have seen in other countries in the world, where the police, army, military intervened to stifle protest and public gathering, COVID or not, are generally incredibly frowned upon in the UK. That is not a policing style which we're either resourced for, equipped for, nor most importantly of all, have public or political support for. That's why the protest took place.
Thank you. So the conduct of the majority who attended the protest was peaceful. It was very passionate, though. But the event passed on without any violent disorder, with no injuries to the public, no injuries to the police, and there were no arrests. However, we all know that the statue of Edward Colston was pulled down and rolled across the city centre and into the river. And some people are asking why these actions were not stopped by the police.
So it is worth standing back and saying, what is our purpose? Our purpose foremostly is to protect life, then it's to protect property and keep the Queen's peace. And actually there were a significant number of people at the protest, and whilst it was peaceful, and I'm grateful that people were protesting peacefully, as you say, feelings were running very high. People were angry and people want change. Without rehearsing all the reasons why, that's the feeling of the moment. So the protest actually had a number of different seats of activity within Bristol at the time that the statue was attacked. There was a significant event taking place at Castle Park, and there was a significant gathering of people in the city centre. and there were also people who appeared to be wanting to move off into St Paul's and other parts of the city. So the police command team are monitoring it all through people on the ground, CCTV and other means. Now what happened is that when they became aware that people were on top of the statue, very, very quickly, and I've said in previous media interviews, about 2 minutes later, the statue was on the floor. So we use a decision-making model called the National Decision-Making Model for Public Order Command. And I wanted to bring the Public Order Manual in to show you, but it's electronic. It'd been a waste of paper to do that. But it's about 250 pages. It's regularly reviewed. All of the people involved in the leadership and the policing of the event were trained and accredited. So they're making decisions in line with this national decision-making model. What's happening? What are our powers? What are our options? What might be the likely implications of acting or not acting in a certain way? And they had a very short period of time to make those dynamic decisions. And actually, it's fair to say there is no good decision. We know that from the public commentary and feedback we've had about whether we did the right thing or not in not intervening. But they came to a very quick view with the information they had at the time that to intervene risked a violent confrontation in order to arrest suspects and offenders, risked drawing other people into the confrontation who were otherwise peaceful, who of course wouldn't know what was happening and why. They would just see the police intervening in a protest and arresting people, and they were angry anyway. So the consequences of that could have been, and we've seen this in Bristol, in my service, we've seen it all across the country, the consequences could have been public disorder, a riot that we were unable to contain. That caused very significant injury to protesters, maybe innocently caught up with it. Injury to people we were trying to arrest, because these people wouldn't simply give up. Injuries to officers. But actually, let's remember where this protest was taking place. It was taking place in a commercial centre in the middle of Bristol. Potentially very serious damage to commercial property by people perhaps getting involved in something that we would really rather hadn't happened. So the officers made a very difficult decision. Had they intervened, I think the consequences could have been incredibly serious, and we might have become the epicentre of a new wave of protest around the whole world. Never mind what would have happened in Bristol. They decided not to. We have got massive amounts of CCTV and social media footage of who's responsible. They made the decision that post-incident, the long arm of the law, so to speak, could catch up with those people and bring them to justice, and our objectives of protecting life and property were better served by not intervening in that very hot moment. And I reiterate what I've said many times. I think they acted with common sense, sound judgment. There was no lack of courage. We had men and women ready who would have intervened, I think at great cost to themselves and others. But that was a courageous decision they made, and they have my full support. So,
thank you. So from a policing perspective, the pulling down of the statue is criminal damage. So what are the next steps for the police?
Well, I don't in any way condone any criminal activity. I've dedicated my professional life to preventing crime and bringing offenders to justice. So I don't feel any sense of satisfaction that a crime has occurred and we've not been able to intervene. We've made that decision. I believe it was the right one. But what will happen now is in line with many other instances of public disorder, whether it's in a protest, whether it's at a football match, is that actually we will review painstakingly hours of footage, we'll identify the people responsible, we will gather our evidence, we will interview them, and we will present a case as quickly as possible to the Crown Prosecution Service, whose decision it will be whether to prosecute anyone or not.
Yeah, and that's the Independent Crown Prosecution Service.
Yeah.
This is important to point out. And will the police review their actions, their operation?
We have a core value of learning within Avon Somerset Constabulary, and so in line with any other major event, critical incident, there will be a systematic debrief and review of the lessons learned. I can assure you that there was a hot debrief on the night before people went home of what happened, why, what had we got to learn, because these protests are still happening, they're still going on, and it's important that we take that learning dynamically forward. So there certainly will be reviewing and learning. So,
thank you. So the government recently announced that we're only allowed to be in gatherings of up to 6 people, and we must adhere to social distancing. And in fact, had those guidance not been in place, I, for one, would have taken part in that protest. But the point is that by letting the protest happen, does that undermine the government's guidance, do you think, on the advice of no more than 6 people?
Well, there's a pragmatic answer to that, and whether it undermines the guidance that government have issued is actually a conclusion that each and every person observing those events and listening to this interview today will reach in their own minds. I can't speak for them. I know that people will have watched a gathering of thousands of people, which is against the government advice, it's against the regulations, and I know, because they've said this to me, why am I bothering? But actually, let's remember why we're doing this and who we're doing it for. We're doing this to stop a pandemic, and we're doing it to stop ourselves becoming ill, our families, our friends becoming ill, and we're all in it together. I would urge people not to gather going forward. I would urge them to do everything they can to comply with this guidance. We've seen and read and heard encouraging news about reductions in infection rates. I think there are many things of our lives that we would all like back. I'd like to be able to watch some football. I'd like to be able to see my mum. There are things I'd like to do as well. So, but whether people are frustrated, whether they feel it's undermined, the right thing to do is to carry on, because that's the only way we're going to get through this.
Do you think people will have less confidence in the police?
Well, I couldn't possibly absorb all of the information that's been coming into Avon and Somerset Constabulary through formal media, email, Twitter feeds, other social medias. But what I can say is I've read some voices who are very angry that we didn't intervene. And to them, I would say, I hear you. I hear that you're angry, and I understand why you're angry. I would ask of them, but please understand the reasons why we didn't intervene. It's not because we're cowards. It's not because we're taking a political decision. It's because we want the best for Bristol in terms of the safety of our people and the safety of the property in it, the bigger picture. And as you pointed out right at the start, so you stand back and look what happened at that protest. Over 10,000 people, a very volatile situation, no injuries, no arrests, 1 report of damage. However serious, 1 report of damage. I would counterbalance that though, those that are angry. I've read many more messages saying that it was the right decision to take and applauding that decision. And I've said this before, and I know that it's infuriated some people. Can you imagine a pitched battle between the police and protesters over a statue that was already damaged, already on the floor, and we already had images of the people that had done that, a pitched battle between us and the protesters trying to arrest a handful of people? I just do not believe that it would have been necessary or proportionate or in the best interest of the safety of the people present or the protection of property around that vicinity for further damage.
And while I will never condone criminal damage, I understand what happened on that day. I understand why people feel that the police should have done something different. But I think considering the operational circumstances, and I believe that you and your team and Andy Bennett did exactly the right thing. It's not for politicians nationally or locally to start second-guessing police operations on the ground. So I hope you found this conversation helpful to you. I think I would like to urge you all to please remember that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and gatherings of more than 6 it's going against the government guidelines. So please, we want you to keep yourself safe. We want you to make sure that when we can look back at this time, that we want to get through this period together. So if you are thinking of taking part in any protest, please think twice and stay safe. Thank you for listening.